What's going on, fam? It's your boy KP, and I'm back with another video. All praise and credit due to the Most High God and His Son, Yeshua HaMashiach. Trying to tell y'all, King Jesus, He's simply the greatest one to ever do it. The greatest prophet, son of the Most High God to ever walk this earth, speaking the truth. Let's see. If you're new to the channel, which I don't think you are because nobody's finding my channel anymore, because YouTube does not like the truth getting out. But, if you're new and you've watched several of the videos and you like the content, please hit subscribe, hit like, hit the notifications bells. You're always welcome to share this video or any of my other videos on any of your platforms. Let's see. What is the title of this video going to be? Title of this video is going to be another Illuminati story time. But the title's going to be Labels Can Change, but All Things Remain the Same. All right, Kim, what do you mean labels can change, but things remain the same? I mean exactly just what I said. And, I got the inspiration for this message because whenever I'm labeled something, I cringe, and then it causes me to think, and then the Most High relays some truth. Like whenever somebody puts the label on me, African American, I cringe on the inside. And, make a long story short, I've had revelations on what this means. If you really think about it, the people that have that label in the United States have had many labels. It's went from slave to colored to Negro to black to African American. So I'm 48 years old, and I've experienced living in the era of 3 of those labels. My birth certificate says mother, Negro. And then, of course, I've lived through the black phase of United States culture, Black History Month. And then we're now in the African American era. And, I think about that, and I think about you can change the label, but all things remain the same. And I think about where we're at right now and the satanic lies. Satan is always about the matrix. The main goal of it is to keep you out, to keep you from discovering the truth. And then that tree of keeping you from discovering the truth, the tree of deception, has many branches on it. And those branches branch out, and then there's many leaves, seeds, and it's a whole mess to keep you from finding the truth of anything. Because once you start finding the truth of some things, they all lead back to the root of truth, right? Which is the word of God. So Satan wants to constantly keep people confused, and you can keep a person confused by relabeling something. It causes them to take a whole new direction of study and discovery, but you're searching for the same thing you've always searched for. They just relabeled it. So when you think about African American, it doesn't have the same meaning as when you hear a term Mexican American. You hear a term like Mexican American, and the thought process is, oh, you're probably an immigrant from Mexico that moved to the United States, and you're like a first generation, therefore you're like bicultural, so you're Mexican American. Or you hear this like if you go to Chinatown in any major metropolitan area, you would meet a lot of Chinese American. There may be first or generation immigrants from China that moved to America, and they're kind of like bicultural, and you would call them Chinese American. So there's a certain like label and a definition that goes upon like a hyphenated person from countries or cultures that you hyphenated, like Mexican American, Chinese American, Japanese American, something like that. But when it comes down to African American, it really doesn't fit. And I'm going to tell you why it doesn't fit and it doesn't make sense. And it's part of a Masonic, satanic, Illuminati deception. Because Mexico's a country and China's a country. But Africa is a continent that like contains 50 countries within it. So one must be willing to look at how Illuminati magic works and Illuminati deception and how concealing the truth in plain sight works to keep people blind, because there's really power in knowing the truth. Most people don't want to come to that type of conclusion that there's power in the truth because they want to rely on the resistance. Well, if I know information, like, the people in power are still the ones in power. That's because they have no understanding of the spiritual realm. And when you pray with the spirit of truth in you, you can change things. Okay, so back to African American. If you would ask the people, most of the people in the United States that are labeled, that receive that label as African American, if you ask them, like, what does that mean? They would say, like, oh, it's people that are descendants from Africa. So immediately they now removed the immigrant part, because you're never an immigrant. It all boils back to slavery. If you don't believe me, read Deuteronomy 28. And a lot of the people are from a tribe. Not all the tribes. They're from one tribe specifically. Read Deuteronomy 28 and see what prophecy the Most High said when his children disobeyed, that they would be carried to the four corners of the world in ships. And try to find another people that prophecy applies to in any of the world. And there's going to be some people that want to argue against this, and it's fine. Like, maybe this isn't the channel the channel for you, because this is really a channel of truth the Most High God told me. And the new lenses he gave me, the spiritual sight to see things for what they are, not what I want them to be. So, people of African descent, okay, I could buy that. All right, I could buy that. But why would you have to put it over a whole continent and not a specific country in Africa? And then two, African Americans who have been in the United States for 400 years, generations, why do you not refer to other people as British Americans or Spaniard Americans or Greek Americans? Or, well, Italians like holding on to their culture, so they'll say they're Italian American, and they'll be 4 generations in. But if one people have a label of African American, fine, you could justify that. I'll sit back and let you go, well, it's African descent, it's a way of identifying that. Okay, fine. Why isn't on the other side of the coin, why aren't people labeled European Americans or British Americans? Tell me why. It's a subtle way of keeping a divide of this is my country and it's not yours, and don't you ever forget it. It's a subconscious way of reinforcing that idea. And Satan needs a perception of the flesh to keep the perpetual hate, spiritual slavery in place. So Satan needs a person with physical sight and spiritual blindness to do his will. Let me give you an example of that. Satan needs a person that is spiritually blind from the truth of the Most High God, but physically able to see, to keep a satanic Illuminati perception of racism alive. Well, Ken, what do you mean about Satan needs your flesh eyes to be in good working order, but he needs your spiritual eye blinded from the Most High God? Well, put it like this. You take any racist, of any race, a black racist hates whites, a white racist that hates blacks, an Asian an Asian racist that hates everybody. Take any type of racist, right? And I remember one of my favorite skits of Dave Chappelle. I think it was like on his first season, where he does a skit that he's a blind black white supremacist. But since he's blind, he doesn't know he's black, but he hates black people, and all of his friends are Ku Klux Klan members. And I think it's hilarious because there's really so much truth in it. So imagine a person being a Ku Klux Klan member that in the 50s, he hates black people, he's hanging them from the tree, they're kidnapping people in the back of his pickup truck and beating them up and torturing them. And then one day he loses his eyesight. It's impossible to maintain his viewpoint on being racist without his physical eyes, without flesh. Without flesh, that satanic sin perpetual behavior will begin to dissipate. Because without your physical eyes, the flesh warred against the spirit and the spirit warred against the flesh. But if the flesh is dead, all that's going to remain is the spirit. So if the physical eyesight died, all that's going to remain is the spiritual eyesight, because spirit can never die. Flesh can die, but spirit can't. So he will begin to change the way he evaluates things. It would be no longer important that, was I sitting at the table with a person of another race? He would start to see things, was I sitting at a table with a person that displayed kindness towards me? Was I sitting at a table when I asked a person to pass me the salt? They did it with kindness. It wouldn't be important of who touched, did a person of another race touch the salt shaker? I'm not going to use the same salt that a such and such race person used. It would become less and less important. He would start to realize things like, hey, when I asked somebody to help me because I was blind, was this person kind or not? Did they get up and show me to the door and then say, hey, go left and here's the bus stop, and they helped me get home? He would not be able to keep his judgment of racism upon others, because that kind of thinking is locked into the physical flesh. You must have a dominant fleshly perception of reality to have that kind of thinking. That's why when I see people, I meet people on the road traveling of all nationalities, and there comes a point where another man of similar color to my flesh will think that we have a lot in common, and we'll get to talking. And he'll say things like, yeah, the white man's trying to keep you down and this, that, and the other. And there may be some truth in the satanic system of what he's saying. But I also know that he has spiritual blindness. Because when you have spiritual sight, you're able to see spirits. And there's good people in all nationalities, and there's bad people in all nationalities. And I'd rather rely on my spiritual sight of saying this person is good-hearted and this person's evil-hearted, over relying on this person's black, this person's white, this person's Mexican, therefore I'm going to pick a side and go with one of them. I'd rather hang out with a room full of green people that are good-hearted than to hang out with a room that has one evil person that looks exactly like me. All right, so back to the original part of this Illuminati story time. All right, so now we went from slave to colored to Negro to black to African American, and African's a whole country. Okay, so what with changing all the labels? We know that, yeah, Ken, I'm following along with you. They keep changing the labels, but you said all things remain the same. So when people are changing the labels on something, they're trying to hide something or confuse you or pull you away from the truth, or they're trying to give you a false perception, or they're trying to place a a Masonic matrix veil between your flesh and the spirit. They're trying to put a barrier between the two, so you only have a fleshly perception. Okay, so why is it African American? Why isn't it a specific country? The same way other immigrants like Italian American, Polish American, Korean American, Japanese American, Thai American, Mexican American, Colombian American. Why isn't it something like that? Why are you putting in whole country? See, a person that moves to the United States from Argentina, you don't call them a South American. You call them an Argentinian American, right? A person that moves from Greece to the United States, you don't call them a European American, you call them a Greek American. So why is it African American? Why isn't it one of the 50 countries? So you always have to approach truth like this. Even when you're not going to know the answer, but you have to say, this doesn't make sense. And after you say this doesn't make sense, and you ask yourself the question, why, enough times, you'll arrive at the truth. Okay, because they're hiding something. They don't want you to know something. That's why they're generalizing it as African American. And then you'll have a person, there's always one person that thinks they're intelligent, and they'll come from the back. Well, Ken, yeah, I agree with you. There was, that was 500 years ago, 400 years ago, they started bringing slaves. They didn't keep records. If you think about it, slaves were considered property, so they didn't want to keep like formal records. Dude, they have formal records. And two, if they don't, okay, fine. I'll go with your logic. See, truth of the Most High God, his spirit's higher than Satan. Satan's very logical and very legalist. But his knowledge is like fleshly knowledge. It's spiritual in nature, but it's of the lower kingdom. God's knowledge is higher. So you would have a person that goes, well, there's no records, so they just kind of generalize it to Africans. They don't know exactly where people come from. Okay, fine. I'll buy into that. If that is true, if that is true, then you must say like the DNA systems of 23andMe are now false. Because if anybody of my complexion or darker, runs their DNA through 23andMe, it's not going to come back and say something like 60% African American. It's going to say 60% Congo, 60% Nigerian, 60% Kenyan. It's going to say something like that. So based off of your logic, either 23andMe and the DNA places either can trace origin by your DNA, either they can or they can't. So you look at all these agencies, it's either you're able to know or you're not able to know. You see where I'm going with this? One of them is true. One of them is true, or they're both a lie. That's how you arrive at truth. One of them is true. There's no way to tell where a person originated from. There's no way to tell, Ken. So we just got to label everybody African American because they're descendants from Africa, right? I know that really means slave when you say African American, because it went from slavery to color to Negro to black to African American. So I know when you hear African American, I just know the label's been changed, and they're still thinking slave, right? So either they can't tell you where you're from, and African American is the correct label, or if that's true, 23andMe is a lie, and when you run your DNA, they can't tell you that you're 60% from Congo or 60% Kenyan or 60% Nigerian. That means they can't tell you that. So somebody's wrong. One of them's right, one of them's wrong, or they're both wrong. All right, fine, Ken. Fine, Ken. I believe you. I believe labels can change, but all things remain the same. I believe it still means slave because it went from slave to colored to Negro to black to African American. So technically they've changed the label, but it still means slave. And then you have some people like, no, it just means people that have that their ancestors come from the continent Africa. You'll have those people and they'll be stuck on it. And they'll be, I'm a good-hearted person. No, people are not that hateful. It doesn't mean that. It just means that they're, it's people that have migrated to the United States of African descent. That's what it means. So, get off of your soapbox, Ken. You're always trying to dissect things. All right, fine. Based off of that logic, Barack Obama is not the first African American president. His dad never moved to his dad from Kenya never moved to the United States and became a citizen. So how is he an African American? How is Barack Obama's story? How does he have the same label of descendants of slaves that went through the progress of slave, colored, Negro, black, African American? There's been a progression of people that started out as slaves. That doesn't apply to Barack Obama. Anybody that says that situation of history applies to him, therefore he has that label, is lying to themselves. Because you know who Barack Obama's mom was, and the racists that like to stir up stuff harped so bad about his birth certificate and his father that you know the history of his father based off of what they told you. His father just went to school, Kenyan dude. Right? So based off of that information alone, there's a difference between the mass majority of the people that have the label African American and Barack Obama's story. Why is he called an African American? He clearly doesn't have the same cultural, ancestral history as all the other people that have that label. Tell me I'm wrong in the comments. Tell me I'm wrong. Fine. Here's another one. Ken, you're being a jerk. You're being a jerk. It simply means people of African descent. And, it's a good generalization. And yeah, it's not going to be 100% correct, but we have to generalize things when you're talking about a lot of people in a big population pool. Okay, yeah, I'll ride along with that. Sure, I can go another round, Satan. This truth keeps coming. This truth keeps drinking. I never get thirsty. I know where the well of living waters is at. I can do another. Let's go, Satan. Let's go satanic deceptions for 100, Bill. All right, fine. It means people of African descent. Okay, so Charlize Theron, one of my favorite actresses. She's kind of hot. She was born in Africa and now lives in the United States. Charlize Theron, the actress. Why isn't she called an African American? She was born in Africa. Her ancestors, her mother, grandparents, great-grandparents were all born in Africa. And now she lives in the United States. Why isn't Charlize Theron called an African American? You see how truth backs you into a corner and kind of shuts you up to where you got to keep playing the 3-card Molly or the shell game, trying to rearrange labels so it can fit you instead of standing on a rock of truth going, you got a point? Why isn't Charlize Theron an African American? Tell me that. She was born in Africa, so were her parents, great-grandparents, great-grandparents, and she moved to the United States. Why isn't Charlize Theron an African American? People, it has nothing to do, that label of African American has nothing to do with where your ancestors from. It's another way of calling you a slave. If they really wanted to give you a label that described your ancestral heritage, they would do a DNA swab and run your stuff through 23andMe, and whatever the majority come back, they would give you that label. They would send your DNA off, and it would come back, and it would say you're 70% Nigerian. They would call you a Nigerian American. But they don't want you to know that, because they don't want you to know that the African Americans in the United States came from one specific part, one specific country that can be explained biblically. They don't want you to know that, because if you know that type of information, you might figure something out. You may read the book of Deuteronomy and figure out something and begin to stumble upon the truth. And your particular satanic matrix that Satan has you under may begin to crumble. And truth is truth. You know, this subject matter doesn't even have to apply to you directly. That's one thing about truth. You can stumble upon it and it reveals a bunch of different other truths that are applicable to you. Like, truth is kind of like universal. It's kind of like universal, like a body, like a baby's body. The arms will never just grow by themselves. The body grows as a whole. And that's how truth is on your mind. You won't just become truthful and have a truthful perception of one area of conversation. When truth begins to grow in you, you start seeing all different types of conversations and subject matters, that you become enlightened to truth in many different areas of your life, not just one specific area you're in that you've arrived at truth. It's like contagious. It's like leukemia is a blood cancer, right? Like, you're never going to get leukemia in only your left arm. If you get leukemia, it's in everywhere in your body, because blood's in everywhere in your body. That's how truth is. You get some truth, it just starts shattering paradigms in all of your thinking. So the labels can change, but all things remain the same. But if you change the labels, you can keep people confused. Let's change the label of what the common cold is, and now we can redefine it. Oh, you got sniffles and a runny nose? That's dangerous. We'll give it a new label. We'll give it a new label and say it's dangerous, that you could die. Fine. Once you believe that, we can tell you to do any type of behavior. But if we call it a cold, you already have a concrete reality of what that is. If we call it a cold, at best, you're going to go get some NyQuil. You know what I mean? You'll put a hot towel on your forehead and you'll get some chicken soup. So we need to change the label. And if we change the label, we can redefine what it is. We can give you a new reality of what it is that's fear-based, and then we can drive you to have certain behaviors. And you know, if I want to like sum this teaching up, you can sum it up like God's the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Like the word of God doesn't change. God does not change. But that's how Satan has pulled people away from the truth of the Most High God. He's changed the labels. And the deception, if you think about it, like the label of what a woman is has been changed. Like, how do you change that? Something so basic and obvious of that, right? Male and female, boy and girl. You have 2-year-old toddlers that have a concept of boy and girl. You know what I mean? It's so ingrained. Like in my early years of the military, I was a mechanic, right? And you get taught certain things like male and female parts. You know what I mean? Like the nut is a female and the bolt is a male. And you refer to things when you're putting things together mechanically, like, oh, I need the female end of this. You know what I mean? Like the outlet on your wall is the female receptacle for the electrical out, right? And the plug is the male. You put the plug into the female, right? So when you talk about electrical connections, you're like, where's the problem, on the female end or on the male end? It's just a way you label something to quickly identify what it is, male and female. You would think like you couldn't change the label to what that is. You would think that it was so obvious, like, yeah, man, Ken, I could kind of see, how they wanted to keep people confused, and they changed the label of what a slave is. Yeah, they changed it from slave to colored to Negro to black to African American. They keep moving things around, so people, if they're searching for the truth, now that the label's been changed, they start all the way over. But if you look at the deception that's come down the pipe now, they've changed the label of what a woman is. So now you got people discussing and trying to figure out what a woman is. And they're confused. They're confused. They're just as confused as the African Americans. When you ask them what a woman is, when you ask a person what an African American is, they're just as confused. They're just like, and then they resort to some BS. Well, God just loves everybody. Quit being so difficult and judgmental. God just loves everybody. And I'll pull out a scripture. Well, it says, Jacob I have loved and Esau I have hated. You know what I mean? Like, who's Jacob and who's Esau? Oh, Ken, you don't want to read into it. Like, quit being hateful. You're like, I'm hateful? I'm hateful? I'm the hateful one, right? You think about something like the United States, they call it conquering. They call it conquering, right? You come here and you kill a bunch of people that are here. They have multiple labels too. Native Americans, Indians, they have multiple labels too. But you rape and pillage and kill off all of them, and you keep a few of the weak ones, right? You kill and steal and take over. And then when you're done killing and stealing, the two people that did all the killing and stealing look over at each other and be like, hey, man, once we get done killing and stealing, we're going to have to make a law that it's illegal to kill and steal. You don't want anybody trying to kill us or steal from us, do you? All right. So when we get done killing and stealing, we're going to make some laws. And well, what if anybody ever says we were killing and stealing? Man, we'll just change the label. We'll call it conquering, or we'll call it discovering. Well, conquering's too harsh of a word. Conquering, a person may figure out conquer. Like, what does that mean, conquer? You know what I mean? Like, if two people were in a boxing ring and one boxer conquered another, we'd figure out he beat him up into submission. You know what I mean? Like, if a woman was playing hard to get and we said a man conquered her, people might know that she had a certain viewpoint of not giving into a relationship, and he had a viewpoint of he was going to get one, and he ended up conquering, so he won. So we won't use a word like conquer. We'll use a word like discovery, and we'll celebrate it like the people we killed are a bunch of nice people, and we'll make a holiday. But we can't call it stealing and killing. Because if we call it stealing and killing, we can't have anybody looking at us, judging us for the evils we have done. So we'll kill off the strong ones, the people that were willing to die, that have any type of morals, of the Indians or the Native Americans, any of them that had any morals they were willing to die for. Guess what? We'll kill them. And then we'll keep the weak ones. Yeah, but like the weak ones that don't resort to violence all the time, the good-hearted ones that just didn't want to kill or get in that violent stuff, the ones that are good people, yeah, they may be God's people. Well, how are we going to control them? Man, you don't know the laws of God. We have to keep them in some type of perpetual sin. If we can keep them in a perpetual sin, they will keep themselves in bondage. Well, how are we going to do that? Let's give them casinos as like a token of reparations. Let's give them casinos and alcohol. That ought to keep them busy and spiritually blind. You see the way it works, people? There's always been slave class and elite class. There's always been Israelites and Egyptians in every country around the world. Nothing changes, only the labels. There has always been slavery. There's slavery to... Come on, man. Do you really think exploiting the labor of another person is some type of practice that just vanished? You know how powerful that is? Like, that's what money and wealth is. In as far as the way this world is ran, that's what money and wealth is. That's the biggest form of wealth, stealing labor from a person. So you think something like slavery just vanished. You can't see what slavery really is because you're only looking at slavery through a fleshly perception. So if you don't see chains, you don't see a master and a slave relationship of oppression. If you don't see it with your eyes, then you think slavery doesn't exist. But that's only because you're locked into a physical satanic matrix of a flesh perception and blinded to the truth of the Most High God, of the spiritual perception. The flesh warreth against the spirit, and the spirit against the flesh. They're at war with each other. So you got to crucify this flesh. You got to crucify your fleshly perception. And that's what fasting does. And then your spiritual perception will become stronger. I hope somebody's getting this, right? Because I just woke up, was laying in the bed, and was pondering over this revelation the Most High God got me. That's why my hair looks all scruffy and my eyes look puffy, because I just woke up. So I'm spitting this download off of the dome. It's just coming down, right? I don't have notes on that. I let the Spirit lead it where it wants it to go. So the gist of the story is, there's two ways to perceive things, from a flesh mind or a spiritual mind, and you have a choice. And most people's spirit has atrophy. You got to work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. It's just like anything. You have to work it out. You have to work out your spiritual strength. You have to maintain it. You have to exercise it. You have to do things to foster its growth. If you do nothing, the fleshly perception becomes dominant by default. Matter of fact, you're born with it dominant. You have to conquer the flesh. That's the only way the spirit overpowers it. But anyway, I'm rambling. As usual, if you like the channel, feel compelled to donate, there'll be donation links in the pinned comment, the first comment, PayPal, Cash App. Feel free to leave a donation and send me a message. Also, my email address is down there as well. But until next time, stay equipped in the full armor of God, covered with the blood, filled with the Spirit in the name of the Son and the power of the true living God. This has been another Illuminati Storytime message. Till next time, I'm out. It's KP. Peace.